What's up, everyone? Hello, welcome to Simulation. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Arvind Gupta.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited for this conversation.
Yeah, likewise.
It's been, I think, 2 years since we met at IndieBio and had some mentoring there. I love the companies, love the mission. I'm excited to talk about that today. We have a good amount to talk about. So Arvind was 10 years in design and the design director at IDEO. And then, what would you call IDEO?
So IDEO is a design consultancy, but really it was the organization that helped make creativity accessible, helped make design accessible to everyone through something that they promoted called design thinking. Yeah. But really it's a process of creativity, and I think it's something that has been a part of me and become a part of me, and something I'm bringing to biology now.
Yes.
So anyway.
Yes, that whole idea of design thinking is now, because they've kind of popularized it, they've helped popularize it.
Absolutely.
So rather than just making something, it's like, okay, well, as you make it, how is it going to impact other things?
That's right.
All that. And then, so the last about 5 years now, a general partner at SOSventures, and then also founder of IndieBio. So what is SOSventures? How did you guys end up starting that? Because that's with Sean.
That's with Sean O'Sullivan. Yeah, so SOS is Sean O'Sullivan Ventures. And it was really interesting. I was in China building the product development team for IDEO in Asia. And while I was there, I had been getting into this whole idea of startups, or thinking about how do you create products quickly? How do you move faster than markets? And so I started mentoring for a hardware accelerator called HAX when it first started. And that happened to be run by my partner Cyril. And Cyril was working with Sean. This is back when SOSV didn't really know what it was.
Cyril was working with Sean.
That's right.
Okay.
And and that's when Sean was really more of a family office. And so they tried this whole accelerator thing with HAX. And it really made sense on many levels, and did exceedingly well. And so SOSV, Sean thought, okay, great, let's look at this model and double down on it and use this as a model for investing. And so rather than like a YC or a 500 startups or a Techstars where it's horizontal and you get any tech startup doing whatever all in the same room, we go very deep in one vertical and say, okay, there is an ecosystem that's going to be more important than almost anything else. And when you're vertical, you could build that ecosystem because there's a benefit to that. It's accretive at that point, and you get
a benefit to the horizontal one as well. Different benefits.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, but when you're talking about something like biology, right?
Oh yeah.
It becomes, the horizontal is within life sciences, and it becomes a thing of its own. And so as I started to get into this idea of how do you build products, but being able to do that in the most efficient way possible, and with the most impact possible, it led me to the venture side. A bunch of VCs started asking me, hey, you should be on the venture side. I had just finished doing a startup with my wife called Starters, which was a fitness app. And not many people know that. Yeah, so, but it was pretty amazing. I designed the Samsung Galaxy Curve, and it gets out there and you see people use it, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, cool. I did a fitness app with my wife called Starters that we built because we wanted to help our parents stay fit and healthy as they got older. And so we thought through that problem of how do you get your parents off the couch, right? Like, what's that first step? Because they don't go to the gym every day necessarily. They don't know how to. That first step is the hardest part, right? It's not that they don't want to. And so we designed an app solely around that moment. And then we launched it, and very quickly it was being used by thousands of people around the world in over 70 countries. And my wife Krista was getting these emails like, you've changed my life. And I was like, man, I've spent a decade in design. I've had stuff in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and no one has ever written me an email that I've changed their life.
Yeah.
And it snapped into focus. What am I actually doing with my life?
Yes.
And what is my purpose? And that's when I started to really think, all this was happening at the same time. Venture capitalists were like, oh, you should go to the VC side. I saw the power of doing startups, of having an idea and then just having the drive to execute against it and seeing the change you could make with that.
Give us a quick idea of the Starters app. What was that first step that got them to move?
Yeah. Oh, so the Starters app is basically it's kind of like a social network along with these videos, these really short videos that Krissa actually filmed herself exercising.
Yep.
And then when the person completes the exercise, mimics the video, it gets pushed on a push notification to their friend list.
And they have to have completed the exercise in order
Correct.
for the push to get it pushed.
Absolutely.
And then it goes through the social network and they're like, look, they're working out. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And then there's a leaderboard amongst that. So it gamified the whole thing. And
still live now?
Still live now. Yeah,
Cool.
Totally.
Cool.
You could go download it now on the App Store and start exercising today.
Yeah.
So, get started.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a phenomenal experience in every single way.
And getting written like that to you and reading it and having that whole feeling of recognition and helping someone else that reset the way that you thought. You're like, how do I get more of that to happen?
That's exactly it. And so I was in a position then where I was coming back to the US, back to the Bay Area, and thinking, okay, well, what do I do now? I see the power of being nimble and agile and focused. And I also see the power of like working with extremely large organizations to drive change on a different level. And so I started talking to a lot of VCs, and finally a couple were, really shared with me that great VCs is really just about mentoring, and just strong mentoring. You have to love mentoring other people, and I think that's, and you have to love also, or not being in the spotlight. I think that's something that we lose a little bit in the current VC landscape, where a lot of it's about brand and trying to get out there, but I think the very best VCs are more behind the scenes because they're not making the decisions about themselves as much as they're making decisions about the companies. And it's a really important skill set that my mentors have helped impress upon me, and I think is really important. So anyway, long story short, I was like, okay, the ability to help companies, or help small companies, groups of 3 or 4 people, productize technology, right? And drive change through that is something that I became very excited about. And so then the question is, in what types of technology? And so not many people know this, but I have a background in genetic engineering. Way back at UC Santa Barbara, I was working on the Tetrahymena ciliate and doing genetics.
The Tetrahymena.
Yeah, it's a very interesting ciliate. It's got 34 copies of its genome, and so there's a bunch of reasons it's a good model organism to study. But this is the very beginning of modern molecular biology, I'd call it, like where we were doing PCRs by hand. Cool. So it was mid 90s, late 90s, and so it was kind of an interesting time, but it was just too slow for me. I just didn't have the patience.
At the time, and now look at how fast.
Now, so you nailed it. And so when I was looking, and I always had loved biology. Even at IDEO, I wrote an article, I was a co-author on a paper for the Journal of Commercial Biotechnology, talking about how design thinking could be used in a biotech setting to improve and increase the speed of pace of innovation. But so I always watched, and because it was always my first love, biotech. But eventually I saw that, okay, well, if I go to venture capital, I think the cost of biology had dropped enough and the speed of biology had increased enough to the point where it was possible to do biotech at a seed stage level. Yeah. And no one had ever thought about it that way. It was still, biotech, super expensive, $10 million, $20 million minimum check size. And I was like, no, I think you could probably go sooner than that and be scrappy and find product market fit. And
the
so
vertical integration so that you have all the components that you need for them to be successful especially in SOSventures, in your office space.
That's right.
There's a wet lab. And
that's right.
Yeah, that kind
and so when I started looking at biology, so what makes biotech expensive? Well, all the capital equipment. So why don't we just abstract that out, build a lab for everyone that everyone can share, and now you've converted your capital expenses into operating expenses, and now you could de-risk your idea on a much smaller dollar basis. And so that was the birth of IndieBio in my mind. And so I came and I gave that idea to Sean. I said, listen, I'll join SOSV if this is something I can build. And he's like, that looks great, let's build it. And
sweet.
that was the beginning. That was in 2014. I joined and then set to work.
And how did you land the San Francisco? What was the idea for that space?
So I live in San Francisco, obviously, and I think one of the important things in terms of the space is it's an accelerator, which means a new group of people come every 6 months, right? So in thinking about a location for something like that, and knowing that I'm going to draw from around the world, you want people to go to a destination, right? So it's not just, it's kind of like you put a conference in Vegas. You're like, oh, go have fun in Vegas and there's a conference, or you put a conference in Hawaii or something. It's like, oh, okay. It's the same thing if I put it in the middle of nowhere. Even if it's slightly cheaper, it's a harder push to get a spouse or something like that to go with you.
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, we go to San Francisco, there's a bunch of opportunities outside of just this.
You're right on the BART line.
We're right on the BART line. So that nailed the actual location down. So we're on Jesse Street, right in Mint Plaza.
Between 5th and 6th.
Between 5th and 6th. And that location is a stone's throw from the BART line, which allows you to live anywhere in the entire greater Bay Area.
Yep.
And be at IndieBio within a half an hour. That's a really important part.
40 minutes.
So you get 15 companies from around the world every 6 months, and now they're not hamstringed by the location and transportation and things like that. Yeah. It gives everyone ultimate flexibility. And so really it was again, you make that decision in service of the companies, and then it becomes something that's good.
And you needed space that had enough, both an electrical grid that could support all of your equipment, but also enough space to support all of that equipment, enough room for all of the 16 companies to have enough of desk space, open floor desk space. So then this is so interesting to be able to think about these first moments. But in 2014, when you were doing kind of the first inaugural batch, what did that look like?
Oh man. So the funny thing is, I got the space, it's being pushed through zoning in the city. I'm having the mayor come and do the cutting and all this kind of stuff. So it's all above board and all that. And of course things are going slower. I'm like, oh man, the deadline for, the start date is fast approaching. And I'm like, we're not going to make it. I was like, okay, what do we do? Do I push the date back? And I was like, no way, we can't push the date back. So I did a quick search and found randomly a biotech company shutting down the dog patch. And that company was vacating their space. I called, got their space, and we, within a month, moved all of our equipment in and was able to start on time. And my wife was pregnant with our first daughter at the time.
Oh gosh.
And she gave birth to Luca, our first girl, 3 days before the first batch started. So it was a fun time, I spent the time in the hospital, and then as soon as we got out of the hospital, I went to IndieBio and welcome to IndieBio, right? We're all going to figure this out together. But it was great. We had Clara Foods in that class, XDEM, which is now Ava Winery. It was just a really remarkable inaugural class. And
in the dog patch to start.
In the dog patch in that lab
for the whole
to start.
6-month period.
For the 4 month, the accelerator is actually four months, and the first one was actually 3 months. It was shorter. We got to 4 months because we saw that 3 months was just a little bit too fast. And so, we were in the dog patch and went through all that, and we had our first demo day actually in our current space. So it shows you how far we've come. It was amazing. And now we hold it in the Opera House in San Francisco, right?
Yep.
So it's been a really remarkable journey, and one I'm really thrilled to go on with other biotech entrepreneurs.
And you had to put together a really strong team of people in order to be able to handle this.
Absolutely.
So then you've had great talent on the team to help you run IndieBio to its fullest, and then the companies that have come on have had the mentorship and guidance of you along the way. They've also had so the second cohort moved into the new space that you have now.
Yes, exactly. In the second, so then the lab was finally ready. We did a little, ribbon cutting and all that kind of stuff, and we moved in, and it was great. And the second cohort had like Memphis Meats, and had a very good therapeutics company, Valley Nanomedical, and it was just it was cool to see. We were learning, startups were learning, and most importantly, I think the world was learning that you can do biotech at an earlier stage, de-risk it. And get these scientists to be entrepreneurs. That was a wholly open question.
Yeah.
Not one person believed that to be true before we started IndieBio. That's a remarkable thing to think about.
Yes.
It's still to this day, I go to the East Coast and we talk about what we do, and they're like, yeah, but when do you bring in the real management team?
Yeah.
And we're like, we don't. We're teaching them to do that, and we're giving them more the opportunity to learn it. And I think, it's very also important to, yes, we do share the common mistakes in the past, but you can't teach people to be entrepreneurs. That you just can give them the opportunity to learn, and they'll go through the lessons themselves. So I'm not presumptuous enough to believe that we're doing it, right? It's the entrepreneurs that are doing it. We're there to support and help them grow. And hopefully help them avoid some common mistakes that commonly kill companies.
Yes, and that's another aspect of the de-risking, is that you're not only providing them with the space that decreases the cost so much and all the equipment, but then also you're de-risking by helping them with this toolkit of entrepreneurship, but also of other skill sets that you're making them, helping them understand and learn. And then with this de-risking process, all of a sudden it's easier to have scientists become entrepreneurs. Right. And then even on places in the world where they didn't know before that it was possible to have biology be accelerated so quickly, now you've done 80 of these?
81 companies, exactly.
81 companies.
With another 15 coming in shortly. It's pretty remarkable, and I think one of the reasons we're doing this is we're able to solve massive world problems. So before, in old biotech, the whole thing was around, okay, here's a team from Harvard that's won a bunch of Nobel Prizes, or we're going to give them $50 million and they're going to figure it out because they're the smartest people in the world. And it doesn't quite work like that. Smart people are everywhere. And what you need are a lot of people working on the world's biggest problems.
Yep.
Because if you do that, there's just not enough teams to work on the world's biggest problems. And so they're just not going to get solved in as rapid a fashion. So if we could take a more portfolio approach to solving things like the food supply chain for 10 billion people on the planet, clean water for the same amount of people, global warming, and eliminating the terrible effects of actual global warming through biology. These are all biological processes, right? And so using biology as a technology, we can go broader than just human healthcare and longevity, and go find a much broader approach, an application space. Those are all trillion-dollar markets.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. We're trying to take a portfolio approach to solving each of those trillion-dollar markets.
Yep. And then you're listing this importance of what we were talking about before the show, which was civilization design. That we see these systems that are a little bit they're not sustainable enough, or they don't work for everyone well enough. And so, what is the way that we can do food, that we can do healthcare, that we can do these different aspects of biology, leveraging technology, leveraging entrepreneurship with the science in order to make the world better across these fields. So you've had you were listing Claire Foods, Memphis Meats. These are like food aspects.
Yes.
So there's some food aspects, but then there's also these therapeutics.
Yes.
These ways to enhance the body's ability to rejuvenate. And so then this isn't even including doing things like storing digital data and DNA.
That's right.
So there's like this wide swath of areas that you're covering that are crucial.
Thank you. Yeah, food gets a lot of coverage on the press, because it's so accessible and easy to understand. That's so it's easy to talk about. Journalists talk to me all the time about this. They're like, so you're doing all this food. What is it that no one's ever asking? I'm like, we're trying to cure so many diseases, but it's harder for people to understand that aspect.
Yeah.
We want to cure disease. We want to help remediate mine wastewater and make actual large areas of land more arable. Agriculture is an important, not just the food aspect, but the agriculture aspect and the actual clean water. We want to solve for scarcity issues. And scarcity is increasing every single day on a number of fronts. And so what we're trying to do is use biological efficiencies to alleviate those scarcities. Yeah. And so, like you mentioned, catalog, storing information in DNA. I mean, now we're talking, right now, if you think about a flash drive, how long does a flash drive last? Right? Maybe 100 years, I'm guessing, before things start to degrade and a lead breaks and it's gone. We are still finding DNA in prehistoric animals and able to decode it, right, and read it. So if you start storing the entire civilization's information database and knowledge in a vial, right, in an Eppendorf tube this big, and be able to store that for 1 billion years, that's a fundamentally different way of looking at things.
Exactly.
And so that's the things we're trying to figure out, right? And those are the things we're trying to fund. And we could fund it because we can take that kind of risk since our business model allows that.
Yeah.
So I see that as our job. Literally, we should be, we're funding a company right now that's taking a nutritional approach to cancer therapeutic, right? And they're going through, FDA trials and a 60 mouse initial in vivo study. But it's something that big pharma or old biotech VC venture capital would look at that and say, oh, it's too risky. $30 million into that. How could we, it's too much risk because that's the kind of check size they write. So it's more canonical. So that allows us to be non-canonical. And some of it works and some of it doesn't. But when it works, it tends to be industry defining or game changing. And I think cell ag is probably our best example and why it comes up so much of a industry redefining category that came out of nowhere 3 years ago.
Everything from the biomaterials, we had Joe Lutvik on the show.
That's right. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
So we ended up sitting down with him at the demo day, which was great. To neurotech, so
that's right.
Being able to compute with neurons.
Yes.
Stem cells, diagnostics.
That's right.
Regenerative medicines. These are all aspects of biology that are being accelerated by technology that are then able to help make a more sustainable world. So how about walk us through, so these are all these different examples, 80 of these different companies now. What does this look like for somebody that wants to get involved with their biology company? They submit a long form, maybe video interview. What's that process like? How do they get chosen?
It's pretty easy for the companies. It's hard for us. But we have an online application. So you go to IndieBio.co and .co,
yep.
and you're able to see apply, and there's a questionnaire that you can fill out. Right, it shouldn't take more than an hour to fill out the application. You can submit a video application alongside it if you'd like.
Yep.
It's not required, but then we see it. And whether or not we meet you, at a postdoc association lunch, or we've never met you and you apply online, everyone puts an online application.
Okay.
So then we review it weekly, everything that's come in, and we start to look for things that are game-changing, trillion-dollar markets. Is this problem addressing 1 billion people or $1 billion?
Yeah.
If so, are these the founders that are going to be able to do it? So we talk to the founders. We have a first cut of interviews that we then do, and that's mostly a scientific due diligence interview, understanding the founder's science fit.
Yeah.
And then we move, because of course, if the scientist is becoming the entrepreneur, they have to be able to drive all that.
Yeah.
And then from there, if that all looks good, we look at the holistic business proposition. And we do another interview where we talk more about go-to-market strategy, what is the actual business this could become. And it's a very interactive process. It's not like tell us the right answer or that's it. We're not looking for a right answer. We're looking for a collaboration, actually. So it's us also gauging, how collaborative are these people? Do they want that? Is this, we learn a lot there. And I think that's a big part of it. It's not necessarily, we don't invest in ideas. I don't invest in ideas. We invest in problems and people, right? Yeah. And then the businesses flourish because you have the right problem with the right people. Yep. That's really this kind of a secret of ours. Yeah. And so we have that, and oftentimes it's now 2 or 3 interviews because, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? You might want to do some research there. They go and do the research, come back, we have another conversation. So often it's very laborious.
Are you still doing all of the interviews?
We're doing all the interviews. I'm in all the interviews.
Wow.
So everyone on the IndieBio team has to agree on every single team that comes in. Wow. And so, it's a huge amount of effort, but it really pays off during the batch and really pays off at demo day, as you've seen. Yeah,
you get to build a close family of companies every cohort. So there's about, you said about 200 or so apply for
double that.
400. 400 apply and then only 400 more. 15 get in. Okay, and then and you can have anywhere from an idea to already $1 million in sales. It can be anywhere.
Absolutely. We like to be the first check-in. We're not always the first check-in. One company.
Check like a.
Yeah, they're literally like a check for money. Yeah. So we want to be the first. Yes, not first check market, first actual cash in. No, because I think often what that does, everyone's in the same place. Everyone gets the same deal. It's it feels like a family.
The deal's $250,000 for 4%.
8% of the company.
It's 8% of the company. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And that's enough money to get them and mentorship and the space, and that gets them enough to get them to the next stage where they're either typically already selling the product or raising more money in order to have they already have a proof of concept.
That's right. It's 70% of our companies raise money, and 70%. And the average raise is $2.1 million.
Wow.
Wow. And the average valuation is approaching $9 million, $10 million. So it's awesome. It's a function, again, of attacking large markets with great founders.
Like you said,
and I think that's really it. The business could change, everything could change, but those two things can't change.
Yes.
Right? The founder can't change.
Yes.
I mean, if the founders are changing now, you don't know what you have anymore.
That's like your design thinking mentalities coming into play again, is identifying these major global problems, and then also making sure that it's the right founding team, that they have the right vision, that they are thinking about it at this massive scale, that they know about the short-term things that they have to do in order to make it happen.
Yeah, the secret, another secret is IndieBio is really a design program for biology and for biologists. It's productizing biology to solve massive problems. And that's all we do. And so if you look at a lot of the things a lot of the tools we use for mentoring and a lot of the sort of advices we give and all that is really based in design. And so, from talking to people and going out and talking to customers and getting sales, traction is everything. We have a saying, sales solves everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And so sales solves everything because you understand your customer and you know what they want.
Yeah.
And until you have a sale, you can't say that. And if you're a therapeutics company, well, now, how do you design a preclinical trial? How do you design the preclinical studies such that your in vivo makes sense or your in vitro makes sense relative to what you're trying to accomplish, either for an IND package for the FDA or for a pharma partnership? What are the endpoints needed? So all of those things can be designed, and with the same amount of money, you could design an experiment that's elegant, that proves to skeptics, that your target is valid or not. Or you could design something that doesn't prove to skeptics, even with the same results. So the experimental design becomes really critical. Finding product market fit becomes really critical. Designing a deal becomes really critical.
Yeah.
So really, design perfuses through all aspects of what we do.
I like how you also said that it's either it has to impact 1 billion people, or what was the other one?
$1 billion.
$1 billion
market size.
market size. Yeah. Again, thinking big. So,
and to that point, I mean, the latest thinking for IndieBio is, as we've started to really collect this knowledge and see what is working for scale, is now starting to really think about businesses as owning entire value stacks. So don't be a component in someone else's product, but be the end-to-end product completely.
Yeah.
And I think that's becoming more and more what we're starting to help entrepreneurs understand is, sure, you could make this thing that someone else adds to their product and then sells to the customer. Or if your thing is so much better or helps that end product so much better, learn the other stuff that customer that you're selling to is doing, and just own the customer yourself. And that's the next big leap for many of these scientists as they become entrepreneurs, right? The first step is, oh man, I can productize this thing that I've been working on the bench, right? That's already a massive mental leap. The second mental leap is, I can now take this thing that's productized and now own an entire value chain to disrupt an industry. That's a very, very big next step. And I see there are some that don't make the switch from scientist to entrepreneur, and then there's some that don't make the switch from entrepreneur to massive scale entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So there's actually a differentiation between the two. And so we're now starting to see, okay, we have real tools around helping people make both.
The first one,
yes,
and then you have to get to the first one first, yeah.
So it's
and then
it's
even
pretty neat.
less get to the second one, and what tools can you help them understand and get used to applying to their lives to get to that more massive scale.
Yeah.
So, okay, give us a really like civilization design driven visual of this. So we have the agriculture systems are just kind of, just blatantly crappy in many ways, like the slaughter of all of the animals across the world. But there's also, amazing things like the fact that we learned how to plant food next to our homes and harvest it so fast and then and feed lots of people. But and there are certain aspects to the way that we do this process of feeding people that's horrible. There's certain aspects to the way that we provide health care. It's more like sick care. We just wait for people to have disease before we actually do anything about it, which is horrible. It's a horrible way to look at things. How can we tweak the human body along the way to keep it healthy so that it doesn't even get sick in the first place? So all of these different ways that you're leveraging biotechnology, give us this vision in the agriculture space and how your companies are really at the forefront of the vision, and same thing in the healthcare.
So yeah, I think really, you said it a couple times. preventing disease in the first place is the most important thing. And so we start thinking about food and nutrition, right, which is related to the agriculture side. I think that's one of the most misunderstood or poorly understood areas that we have, which is remarkable because it's a thing we do 3 times a day, minimum, right? We eat, and yet is a carb a good thing or a bad thing? Is protein good or bad? In what proportions? How do we know? All the studies have been so tainted by different interests that it's hard to believe or hard to know what it is that's helping us or hurting us. And so we're actually looking now for really great nutrition companies. We see that as another $1 trillion problem is food as medicine, I think is critically important. Thinking of health as a holistic point of view, our mind, the food we eat, how we live, how we work, all of that comes together, and we're at the intersection. We're thinking about how do you do things at the intersection. One of the things that's gonna change, talking about designing civilization, and I have said this before. I think we're headed towards something I call homo concilio.
Homo concilio.
Yeah.
Teach us this.
So concilio is just the Latin for designed. Mm-hmm. So
cool.
We will be able to design ourselves, our offspring. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's going to be a lot of ethical questions, but the technology to do so already exists. The technology to do so safely and repeatably will exist very shortly. And the rest is a question of genomics and understanding genotype to phenotype. Now, phenotype is generally based on networks of genes working together. So it's not going to be as much as changes one gene and then you change your eye color or the shape of your nose or whatever.
It's going to be multiple genes.
It's going to be multiple genes all working together in extremely complicated ways. With with the regulatory molecules involved, and so it's not a simple problem, but it is a solvable problem. It is more engineering than it is fundamental science at this point.
And then ethics as well, engineering and ethics.
And I'm separating ethics out just to see what's possible versus what should be done.
Yeah.
But so the factors that lead to what we call intelligence, right? The ability to guess well. The factors that lead to the ability to communicate well. All of these things we'll understand. It's like a graphic equalizer, right? Some networks, genetic networks, are more important than others, and then we'll find key pathways within those networks that are targets. Mm-hmm. And they might be genetic targets, they might be regulatory targets, but it'll be possible to attenuate them. And these are now targets for the design of human behavior or humanity. And I think we're crossing over into that already a little bit, right? I have two kids, 2 girls, and we did genetic screening, right? Of course, for myself and my wife, and God forbid if we had, the child had Down syndrome or something like that, you do it early enough to have the ability to terminate the pregnancy, right? And that's a widespread thing. Mm-hmm. So already we're making decisions based on genetic screening. And granted, it's for good reason. Now, the ethical area becomes, well, what makes you, what's the real decision, right? There's a heart defect. Okay, that's a really good reason to augment that genome, right? Fix that heart defect. What about making the heart 20% stronger? Right? I don't know. That becomes a really interesting question. What if you're a nation state that says, our competitive advantage in the next 3 generations is going to be able to be stronger, faster, smarter than any other nation on the planet, and you institute that. Mm-hmm. It's a crazy. These are the questions this technology raises, and no one has the answer for this.
You're coming up with the big can of worms that we talk about on the show a lot.
Yeah.
How do we work across the world together as all these different technologies are now proliferating with AI robotics, biotech, genetic engineering, even what's coming up with space and blockchain and all these different technologies? How do we ensure that across all of the different borders, when you look at the Earth from the moon, no borders,
that's right,
just 7.5 billion people, but when you zoom in on a satellite view of the US and Mexico, you see that border and you see there's two different socioeconomic statuses completely, and they're right there next to each other. So how do you think that we're going to end up collaborating on this together across the world?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that right now. I mean, honestly, I think I think collaboration is the key. I like that you use that word. And I think having a very strong ethical line is going to be incredibly important. If this type of technology are only available for pay, let's say for the 1%, and the 1%'s now giving a genetic advantage to their children, well, that gap, it becomes insurmountable within generations. And so in the very long run, we need to mitigate that and move all of humanity forward so that that line that you see from space, as you put it, disappears. Because I think the power of biology is something that allows us to think about living in a world of surplus, and that's something we talk about going to Mars because Earth's not going to be around anymore. That's not true necessarily. Like, I think we can have Earth be a place of surplus with double the population, as long as we understand efficiencies and how we use it. Yeah. And just like with global warming, it'll take all nations working together to adopt codes to not pollute and emit carbon and add to CO2. We're going to have to do the same thing with genetics. We're going to have to do the same thing with the power of AI. And I mean, when you think about AI-controlled weaponry, that's like a truly horrifying thought, right? And so we have to agree to not do these things.
It seems that there's a base level of agreeing to do things like eradicating suffering. That seems to be this basic level of agreement, that if a child's going to suffer in some way genetically and we have the ability to fix it, we should democratize that to the point where it's as cheap, potentially even free, funded by the collective as possible, so that way you don't have to suffer.
Yeah, I agree. And now you're getting to the other part of civilization design, which I think is really important and not talked about enough, which is the cost of healthcare, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. So, there's a great article that was put out recently, I can't remember who. They said, what is the business model of curing disease sustainable, right? If you're in the business of curing disease and your business is sell these little pills, right? And you give one pill to someone and they never need that pill again, right? How much are you going to charge for that pill, right? And so you're in this conundrum. I think that's a real thing to think about, and especially if we're talking about capitalism as a predominant economic structure, or that hangs everything together, and profit driving being the driver. Well, then that is a big question around healthcare. It should be democratized. It should be available to everyone. But then how do you fund the research and the average of $600 million was required to create one cancer therapy? That's the average it takes to make a drug. So all of that needs to be recouped. Otherwise, why bother, going into that business?
Yep.
And so I think it's an open question. Is it a state-funded thing? Do these things move out of the capitalist? I mean, I'm a venture capitalist, right? That's like literally in the title of my job. Yep. And so, but at the same time, I fund biotech because I think these problems are really important, and it's.
You have a philosophical and ethical grounding in what you're doing. that's what's missing, I think, in a lot of the conversations around funding things.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I can't. That's our 15-minute timer. Gonna put this guy on the board. So
I like it.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, let's see now. Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm glad you enjoyed the 15-minute timer. All right. Let's do some power rounds through this ending. What are your thoughts about regulation? Because a lot of people say that regulation is really important, so that way we don't have all of the harmful effects of not having any regulation. That would be bad. But also regulation can stifle innovation. Mm-hmm. Where do you think that harmony exists?
Regulatory for therapeutics and for medical devices.
Let's go there, but then almost everything, really, yeah.
Well, for human healthcare, I think is critically important. The drive for profit will put more lives at risk if there wasn't a regulatory body to stop it. So I'm a VC that embraces regulatory. I think now the question is, how do you make regulatory as efficient as possible so that we're not discarding great drugs, potential therapeutics, and we're actually embracing innovation and giving it a true test of how it works or not, and not overinflating cost, right? So there's an optimization game that needs to happen. But I think regulatory is important. And regulation in general in tech has been around commerce to protect commerce, right? So if you look at taxi cab medallions as the most recent, like the Uber versus the world sort of thing, right? Taxis had medallions, and that was a way of protecting the business and creating a price floor. Well, we all know in economics that's not true competition. And true competition, the customer always wins. And so Uber was able to break that, and literally the customer has won, and Uber has become the most valuable private company in the world in doing so. So regulatory is different in different places. I think when regulation is protecting commerce, I think it should be broken by protected parties. I think regulatory that is protecting human health and consumer interests, I think it's important to keep. So there is a balance. I'm not as libertarian as others in that all government is bad. I think regulation provides a helpful framework, especially in a capitalist society where profit is the motivator.
Correct. And then, what about the follow-up to that being that where do you find yourself, and where do you find the optimal place to be for teaching children into the world, the concept of wanting to make great impact and value and make enough money to sustain that research and development, but then also have a social cause or some sort of aspect to your philosophy that has to do with wanting to take capital and dematerialize yourself away from diamonds and all that crap and move more towards how do I help the person that I'm walking by across the street that doesn't have a home or that doesn't have the mental state to get themselves up on their feet? How do we make a transition from diamonds to homeless people?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question because it's something I think about every day with my two little girls. They're 3 and 1, and I'm always thinking to myself, how do I raise the very best people possible? I take that more importantly than my job, or that is the most important thing in my life. Yeah. And so, I think, number one, my wife and I live by this rule. We try to create more than we consume. Mm-hmm. So, always creating something, right? Like whether that's artwork or whether that's design work or whether that's, we want to be creating, and not consuming as much, and that whether that's television or Facebook or Instagram, that's a tug of war, and your time is going to go in one bucket or the other. So you want to try to put it in the create bucket.
I love that.
And so the other side is now when you're in the create bucket, what do you want to create? And so you could be inspired now by the problems around you, right? By the homeless plight that you might see. That's one of the reasons we put it on Jesse Street, right? There's a lot of mentally ill people that become drug addicts, and there's a methadone clinic above us. And it's a stark reminder every single day that there's a lot of, it's easy to think about the Silicon Valley as this bubble of technology and money. It's hard to think of Silicon Valley as that bubble when you go to IndieBio, Jesse Street, right? Yeah. And it's a daily reminder of what we have to do. And so that's, you can see it as unpleasant or you can see it as inspiration. I'm trying to teach my girls to see the world's problems as inspiration versus something that should be brushed under a rug. Yeah.
We need more parents like thinking that way. Okay, how about we ask you, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
Besides my wife and my two girls, I think that's really it. I mean, those are the two, the three most beautiful things in my life. But I think if I take it outside of that, I'll say it's watching someone take their life's work and turn it into something that creates human value. Yeah. That transformation is something I've seen over and over again now, and it never stops striking me as so impactful. I mean, it's like, to me, it's that's a pretty remarkable moment. It's like, wow, they wouldn't be doing this. This company wouldn't exist if they didn't have that space at IndieBio to try and learn and fail and get up and then do it again. And then all of a sudden, their life's work is being used to change someone else's life, as opposed to be a paper that is sitting online somewhere that has 3 hits. And 2 people, maybe one of those people skimmed it. It's like, that is a remarkable thing, and that's something that's really beautiful, and I watch that over and over again.
And we love the idea of figuring out how to get children to find that similar kind of inspiration of bringing value to the world, their work bringing value to the world, and we try and figure out how exactly to do that with the children that we're raising. Do you think we're alone in the cosmos?
Mathematically, no. I would definitely say we're not alone. Now, what does the other life form look like? Who knows? I mean, there's different evolution, different environmental conditions will give rise to different evolutionary traits. So, on a sulfuric world, we might be like, you look at our hydrothermal vents, you have life in the darkness, eating sulfur as an energy source. So, and if that kept going, keeps going, what would that evolve into? It's a good question. One, I worry that the distances are too large, for us to ever find out. But I don't think we're alone.
And do you think we're in a computer simulation?
No. I mean, I understand, again, the mathematical argument for it. But I'll take Descartes' approach and say it doesn't matter. I may be fooled, but if I have these senses and I can think for myself, and therefore I am me and I can be that. If I'm a simulation, it doesn't really matter.
What would you say is the deepest emotion you've ever felt?
I mean, love. That's an easy one. I think that's the, love is something that's the strongest. Love and hope. Let me buttress that. I think when I didn't have love, I had hope. Yeah. And then that hope got replaced by love. So those are the two things.
Here we go. We're going to put so many of our pieces into the biotech equation now, and we're going to have, it's being accelerated at crazy rates. We're absolutely grateful to have people like you working on this.
Thank you,
Arvind, thank you so much for coming on to the show. This
has been a lot of fun. It was a real pleasure. Great questions.
I'm glad you had a good time.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for tuning in. IndieBio.co. We'll put the link in the bio. Do check them out. Do apply. Is applications closing for the next cohort?
Yes, in a couple weeks. It's on the deadline's like right up there.
Cool. So a couple weeks left until their application deadline closes. Do check them out. Give them some support as well on their mission. Watch their content. They have so many of these portfolio companies.
Yes.
We have a couple, almost like a dozen interviews of the portfolio companies as well. So go look at those and share them. Share what they're doing with other people around you. Think about what life could be like if agriculture was more sustainable or if healthcare was more sustainable. So join us in this biotech revolution.
Renaissance.
The biotech renaissance.
It's a renaissance.
It's a biotech renaissance, exactly. And we're coming at you hot. Give us a subscribe, give us a like, give us a comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Join us on Patreon so we can make this process sustainable. We'd greatly appreciate that support. Thank you, Ron Vargas, our producing partner. And we will see you guys soon.